Once a cheater, always a cheater. Is it true? Does it mean that if you've been on the receiving end of infidelity in your relationship or your marriage, is that the end? Well, I know the pain that you're going through right now is so intense. It's totally turned your life upside down. And you're not sure which steps to take and what to do, and you're getting contradicting advice probably from lots of different people. So what we need to do is really explore the depths of this topic. And so in today's video, I'm going to explain to you 4 really important points that you need to understand, the steps you need to take, what you can do to be able to give yourself the best chance of saving this relationship or marriage, but also, really importantly, healing yourself in the process. Firstly, let's talk about understanding infidelity. It's really important to remember that whilst someone has gone off and cheated, that doesn't mean that that person is a terrible individual. Often, good people do bad things because they're in a really dark place mentally and emotionally. I know that's hard to accept, and I'm not in any way condoning that sort of behavior. I always say it takes 2 to tango in terms of getting a relationship to a certain point, but for that person to go off and cheat, that's unacceptable behavior, and we have to just completely state that. But I always believe we have to take ownership of how the relationship has got to that point. I know that's an uncomfortable thing to have to do, and when someone has treated you in a particular way, it's so easy to want to just go, look, screw him, he's a terrible person, I hate him, I don't want anything to know about him. And so when we're in that situation, it prevents us from being able to actually move forward because we're so consumed by the anger, by the feelings of betrayal, from all the resentment and so on that you're feeling right now. You're completely entitled to feel that way, but I think there does come a point where we have to move past that and actually try and work out what is going to be for the greatest good of my life and for my family's life as well. And if you can really take the time to actually step back, understand what are some of the reasons that it's got to this point. Did you guys get into some bad communication dynamics over the years? Were there other pressures that came in? Did you notice he started to disconnect when your children came into this world, or whatever it may be? There's lots of different types of stresses that come into a relationship. When you understand those stresses and you start to work out what's actually happened, it allows you to step back and ask yourself the question, does this man uphold the values that I am really looking for as a person? Like, what are your values? Think about that. How important is integrity? How important is kindness? How important is that empathy shown to other individuals and so on? I'm not saying one's better than another, but each person has their own individual values of what's most important. Or was he maybe more interested in, trying to get attention all the time, or, appear superior or significant and so on? There's lots of other values that people uphold that don't result in 2 people really connecting at a deep level. You've got to ask yourself, what kind of relationship do you actually want to create? And how differing are your values at this moment in time? It's an uncomfortable thing to have to do, yes, but it's really important for you to be able to step back and actually be able to understand this information to make the best decision that you can moving forward. Sometimes I've seen situations where you get good men who make poor decisions because they've gone into some really dark places. Is he a good man, or is he someone that's actually demonstrated over a period of time that he doesn't have the kind of values that you're actually looking for? And maybe through just loyalty, or through the fact that you've got this family and it's too scary to rock that world too much, that you've just kind of hung in there, but that love and that connection has actually diminished for a long period of time. Really ask yourself those honest questions, but you've got to look at the overall marriage as a whole and do a bit of a stock take. Understand how it got to this point, and that can actually help you to find the clarity that you're looking for. Point number 2, open communication. Having that open level of communication is so important in order to be able to give yourself any chance of being able to take this marriage forward after infidelity. As I said before in point 1, there's often reasons that a relationship has got to this point. We need to understand why. We need to understand how it got to that point. And rather than focusing too much on the infidelity piece, which I know is going to be tempting, you're going to want to know about everything about that woman, you're going to want to know how it happened, when it happened, how frequently, and so on. And just to satisfy that, you can ask those questions. But the most important part is how it got to that point. How did the relationship get to that point we felt he needed to go off and do that? As I said before, it's not condoned in any way, but if you can understand how the relationship got to the point, you can actually start to pave the way for some reconciliation. Now, the important thing when you're actually communicating is to really take an approach of being curious and not judgmental. So what that means is that when he starts to share some of those things, you might say something like, okay, so what you're saying is that when the kids were born or whatever, you felt like I wasn't giving you the sort of attention that you were hoping for, you didn't feel that important, or you just didn't feel like you mattered and so on. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing? And you might say, yeah, that's what I felt. So, okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Can I ask, what would you want to have seen during those times? What would have been important for you? And you're not saying it from an angry way, what would you want to have seen? What would you want me to do? I mean, it was my kids. I don't get it. You're not coming from that angle at all. You're coming from a very empathetic perspective. Whenever we apply anger, that leads to resistance. But when we open our heart and we actually understand, just take away the marriage for a second and look at him as a human being. Almost just sometimes visualize him as a young little boy, because it's the primal instincts. It's the deeper emotional scars that lead people to go off and do these sorts of things. Now, let's just put to the side these, the narcissists and the sociopaths and so on for a second, because those individuals operate very differently. But on the assumption he's a good man, a lot of the time it is the fact that he's got his own issues, he's got his own wounds and deeper scars and so on, and that's what leads to that kind of behavior. So if you can start to ask questions in a more understanding and compassionate way, in a curious way, it can give you some really good information there. You can understand what's actually driving that individual. And then also that gives you the chance to be able to share and understand what's going on. So once again, let's just say, for example, that you just had kids and your whole energy was focused on the kids and so on. You might say, look, having kids was such a difficult thing for me. I had to go through all of these difficult things. I felt like I was going through postpartum depression. One of the things I really struggled with was I felt like you didn't really understand what I was having to go through at that time, and you were always at work and so on. You talk about these kind of things, but you don't do it in a critical way. You're just kind of explaining in as calm a way as possible, helping him to understand your world. Now, there's always going to be some emotion. I'm not expecting this type of conversation to just be calm and happy and joyful. But I think once you're actually able to communicate in that way, both of you get some really good intel around what's actually going on inside at the deeper level. Understanding that can really help to set a pathway for future reconciliation, because you're understanding the deeper aspects of each other. And I always say that if you can understand individuals' emotions and their fears and their deepest desires and all of those sorts of things, then the partner's not going to want to go anywhere else, because the reality is that you know him better than he knows sometimes himself, or that anyone else knows him. And that is such an amazing thing. There's such a gift. And I've always seen the best couples, both parties love being around each other, but they know each other deeper than anyone else. And that's what you've got to really make sure you focus on here. Thirdly, it's really important to get professional help. I know that in these situations we feel like we can just sort all these things out ourselves, or just have those conversations and we can work it out ourselves. But the truth is that relationships are not just about the two people who are involved. It's actually about going deeper into the wounds and the emotions and so on that we're actually facing. So what I mean by that is, let's say you're an individual who maybe had a tough upbringing and you've had some deep-rooted beliefs of I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. Then what's going to happen is that's going to have played out in your relationship over the years. And if we don't resolve and work through those things, it's very difficult to actually create a high-quality relationship or marriage in the future, or even just to try and reconcile or move forward. I see it all the time in my work, where I see these patterns playing out a lot, and it creates self-sabotage. It prevents them from being able to take the actions that they need to in order to move forward, because they're worried that if they do those things, then it's going to end up leading them on some path that they're really, really afraid of what it's going to be like, because they don't have certainty of it. They don't know what it looks like. So they'd rather deal with the devil that they know than the devil that they don't know. And even if there's something that's extraordinary that could possibly be created, the thought of it is just too much to bear, because their whole life they've been thinking about I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love and so on, and they think that that's just going to carry on to the future. The truth is you absolutely can heal, you absolutely can transform, you absolutely can create that joy and happiness that you probably crave for so long. And it feels like it's out of reach, but I promise you it's closer than you think. It's really important to get the necessary help with this. Like I say, a counselor or therapist or coach or whoever, just make sure you get some support on some level as a starting point. If you want to learn a little bit more about how maybe I can help you on your journey, then in the description section below, I'll just put a link in there which says book a call with me, and I can explain to you a little bit more about how I can support you on this journey and help you to move forward, or even just give you a couple of tips and tricks on how to actually progress on this really, really difficult journey that you're on. But whatever you do, make sure you do something. Get the support that you need. It is extremely important, because sometimes when we're in difficult situations like that, we need someone to be able to guide us over and above the family support. And just quickly on this point, one of the things I see a lot is that people will often lean on their friends or their family for support, and that's wonderful. I encourage it. But the challenge is that they're very biased because they love you. They support you. They want to be there for you. So they're going to have a different perspective. They're going to want to do everything that they can to make sure you don't get hurt, which often means that they will look at the partner and think, nah, he's useless, he's a terrible person, get rid of him, you don't deserve that. But sometimes that may not be the right action to take. You know, maybe reconciliation is actually on the cards, and you've got to understand the deeper worlds that you've been living in, and then give yourself the best chance. And that's why getting professional help is extremely important, because they can see things that you may not be able to. And finally, forgiveness and healing. You know, forgiveness is not just about excusing that behavior and just moving on, just pretending like it never happened. Absolutely not. We want to actually remember that if we get caught up in all of that pain and that anger and that resentment towards that person, there's only one person that gets affected, and that's you. You're the one that's feeling that. You're the one that's experiencing all of that pain. And I'll never forget, about 6 years ago in New Zealand, there was an absolute tragedy, and 50 odd people died, and it was just horrific. And they did a memorial a week later, and they spoke to this one man, and he got up on stage, and his wife had been killed. And it just broke my heart, but he said one thing which I'll never forget. And he said, I don't want my heart to bubble up like a volcano. I want it to be filled with love. I don't agree with what this man has done, but I choose to love him as a brother. I mean, he would have every right to want to inflict harm on the person that killed his wife, but instead he chose love because he didn't want to be filled up with all of that anger. Now, a lot of people don't feel like they're capable of it, but I do believe that all human beings have the capacity to have this kind of love. And does that mean, once again, we let that person get away scot-free with some of their behaviors? Absolutely not. But we release the pain that it's having on us so that we can find clarity, and that we can find love, and we can find compassion. And if you end up in a situation where you heal and you forgive, but you still end up making decisions saying, you know what, I don't know if this marriage is the right thing anymore, that's perfect. But you might also get to a place where you realize, you know what, he's actually going through a lot of pain at the moment, and I understand it. And I see how our relationship has got to this point. I understand what's actually happened, and there's something in my soul, in my gut, that's telling me that I have to give this a chance. Then you absolutely can go down that path as well. But the key is heal you, work on you, release the wounds that you're holding on to. You know, Marianne Williamson, in her book Return to Love, talks about forgiveness. Says forgiveness is selective remembering. It's a conscious decision to focus on love and to let everything else go. Now, just to be clear here, that's not just love for the other person, that's also love for ourselves. You know, sometimes we think, oh, I love that person so much and I'm going to give to him or whatever. But we're actually depriving ourselves of that love because we're tolerating behavior that's simply not acceptable. Sometimes it's actually saying, well, I love this man, but I love me. I love who I am, and I'm going to stop treating myself and being subject to this kind of treatment moving forward. And it's time for me to walk away. Or, I love this man, I love me, and I truly believe that we can create something special. And that's the magic of forgiveness and internal healing. So I hope all these points make sense and give you some clarity on what to do if you've been on the receiving end of infidelity. And I know it's tough, I get it, That healing process is so difficult, but I want you to know you're not alone. Transformation is real, and I know and I believe in you and your capacity to create the shifts that you're looking for. So if you like this video, make sure you hit that like button below. If you want to get more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. And do let me know if you've got any questions or comments or takeaways, just write them below and I'll respond to every one of you. And by the way, what I'd probably recommend you do now, just to dive a little bit deeper into the male psychology piece. Below is the video where I talk about 4 feminine traits that men find wildly attractive. I think it's going to be really insightful for you and help you to understand more about the male psychology piece, just so it can help you to do your stock take and put all the pieces of the puzzle together to be able to move forward and ideally save your marriage and create the best possible life for your family. So thank you so much. I wish you nothing but the best. God bless you and your family, and I'll talk to you in the next video.